Hey guys, welcome back to the studio for another lesson. This week we'll be doing a little phrase study and adding some harmonic movements to single note lines. Learning to improvise with chordal moves like this is a huge topic, so don't worry, I'm plugging away on a couple larger videos surrounding some of the elements involved, but I wanted to make sure you guys got a little preview of what's to come. Today, I'll show you a few phrases that work over a 3-6-2-5 progression in the key of C. We'll start out by learning each phrase as a single note line before unpacking it and discussing how and where we can inject chordal options, as well as the challenges and pitfalls that might present. You guys ready? Let's get started. I think one of the most overlooked topics when it comes to learning to improvise on the guitar is being able to seamlessly integrate harmonic movements into your single note lines. Now, pianists obviously have a much easier time with this because they've got a whole other hand to play the changes with, but we're limited to just the 4 fingers on our left hand. With that in mind, we have to be choosy about how and where we add harmonic movements into our playing. These phrases should give you a good idea of how I typically use this approach in my playing. Here's the first phrase we'll be working on as a single note line for you to check out now. All the language in this one is stuff you've undoubtedly heard me play if you've seen any of my videos in the past. It's also stuff that sits really well in my ear and my hands, so it's a great candidate to work out some thicker harmonic movements on. Let's dig in a little deeper and unpack how I'd go about doing that. We start off with a chromatic approach into the root of the E half diminished. Already, this is a great spot to use a little chord movement. I went with this partial diminished, thinking about G minor 6 diminished scale, and this being the off chord in that scale, pulling me up to the root. From there, I went up the chord and then resolved on the next downbeat with this voicing for G minor 6. It's always a safe bet to resolve into a chord on a strong beat like this if you can make it happen without too much trouble. Continuing on from there, I came down a C7 scale with 2 half steps to get the flat ninth of an A on the downbeat of the next bar. I really wanted to make another chordal move happen here, but the line was moving too quickly to use any 6 diminished stuff, so I just went for some chromatic planing. Put simply, that's where we just move into the voicing that we actually want by a half step. Since the line was already moving with a chromatic half step, that works pretty well and doesn't stick out or bother the ear too much. Off this B flat minor 6 voicing, I pivoted down to the third of A and then continued up the chord. I decided to resolve on a push into beat 3 on this diminished voicing, which gave me a different take on the A7 altered sound. From there, I was thinking about E flat 7 over A7 and played these intervals from the E flat 7 scale. 2, flat 7, 1. Now that root is also the flat 5 of A flat and pulled up really nice into the ninth of D on the next bar. But this little chord that I resolved into could be from a lot of different places, but I think the most apparent is that it's the top part of our typical D minor ninth voicing. I just left off the root to make things a little less clunky. From there, I came down a G7 scale with 2 half steps to get the flat 7th of a G on the downbeat of the next bar. Sticking purely to single notes for a bit, I was thinking about B flat 7 here and went up the chord off the 5th of B flat all the way to the 9th and then resolved up again, but switched into A flat minor 6 and played this chord, giving me the sound of G7 flat 13 sharp 9. Off that chord, I decided to slip back into B flat 7 and play these intervals. Flat 7, 4, 5. I harmonized the last 2 of those as a partial D flat 7, or D flat 9th, and then this partial diminished to pull me up into yet another partial voicing, this time for a C6. Now I finished off the phrase by playing one of my favorite little blocks of language and stuck the landing with a simple C major 7 voicing like this. Now let's take a listen to how that phrase sounds with all the chord movements added in. I don't want to say that sounds better than the same language when played as single notes, but it's certainly a lot more intense and full sounding. Keep in mind that the thicker you try to make your playing, the harder it's going to be to execute it at bop tempos. Next, let's wrap up today's quick lesson with a phrase that'll give you a better idea of how I approach this kind of playing at faster tempos. Before we do that though, I need to give a quick shout out to TrueFire.com for supporting the channel. TrueFire is an online lesson library that's host to literally thousands of courses on a wide range of musical topics from some really amazing artists and educators. With synced notation and tablature, as well as slowdown and looping features, it's super easy to follow along no matter what course you decide to pick up. While you wait for my courses to drop, you can use my link in the description or use offer code STUDIO for 35% off at checkout, and you'll also be supporting the channel at the same time. It's never been a better time to learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Now, let's finish up today's lesson and learn a phrase that we can use harmonic ideas in at a faster tempo. This line uses some similar language, but since we're going to be playing it at a faster tempo than the previous one, we'll have less opportunities to add in harmonic moves, and the ones that we can add will most likely be a little thinner. Let's start out by taking a listen to what the phrase sounds like as single notes. While I've been calling this passage one phrase, you can probably hear that it's actually a bit of a call and response. That space in the middle is key to the way that I approach playing with more harmonic moves in my solos at a faster tempo like this. That little bit of space between phrases is perfect for doing some comping in. Let's take a closer look at this line and see how and where we can add some chord movements in. Since this phrase starts off on the third of an E half diminished, it's practically screaming to start off with the standard voicing I bet all of you know. From there, I just came down a C7 scale with 3 half steps to land with the flat 9 of the A on the downbeat of the next bar. Unlike the last one, I didn't opt to harmonize this one because of the register it's in, but instead I came down a C7 arpeggio and then pivoted up to the root of the A. This is the moment that I mentioned earlier. That little bit of space that I decided to leave here is perfect for some sparse comping. It really isn't much time at all, so I just decided to play guide tones, the 3rd and the 7th of the A on the end of 3 here, and then jump up to this F major triad to fill in for D minor 7 on the end of 4, pushing my way into the next bar. Now, thinking way ahead here, I knew I wanted to resolve to this voicing of D flat 7 on the downbeat of the G, so I decided to do something weird and play all these notes on the B string so I could make sure that I nail that chord with a relatively simple fingering. The scale run I did there is just G7 scale using the 3 half step rule to get down to the flat 7 on the downbeat. Off this D flat 7 voicing, I went up the chord from the 3rd of the D flat, the flat 7th of the G, and then resolved down into this voicing for D flat 7 since it had the note that I needed on top and it was easy enough to get to. From there, I just walked down the D flat 7 scale and resolved into the 5th of the C major. I needed to make sure that I ended this phrase on my 3rd finger though, so I could play this first inversion C major 7 to round things out and keep everything in motion just a little bit longer. Now check out how that phrase sounds when we put everything together at speed. Thanks for sticking around to the end of today's video. I hope you guys have fun working these phrases up. It's a really great approach to use when you're playing in a trio with just bass and drums. Let me know down in the comments if you guys have any questions about learning to play this way, and I'll do my best to answer them. It can be really difficult at first to improvise these sorts of chordal moves, so make sure you check back next week where we'll be getting into the first of a series of deep dives I'm preparing on how to practice this stuff. As always, if you found today's lesson helpful, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications too. If you want to get access to a PDF for today's material, which includes an additional 6 chordal phrases, along with the whole back catalog for all the videos on my channel, you can get that for as little as $10 a month over at my Patreon page, or by just hitting that join button right here on YouTube. A special thanks goes out to Milan de Kaiser and Ron Maestas for being studio fans. I really appreciate the support. An extra special thanks is due to these studio members for their support as well. PH, David Zuckerbraun, Max Irwin, Everton Armstrong, Stephen Schwartz, Aaron Walters, Stephen Prager, Louis Rosen, Zé Soares, Michael LeBroy, Carl Jackson, David Wortman, Aldo Fonseca, Jesse Cable, Tyler Koserek, Ron Askew, Jason, and JP Faulds. An extra special shout out to Jazz Luminaire patrons Bill Jacob and Vivav Bapati. Thank you guys all so much for your continued support. I'm David Shore, and thanks again for hanging out with me at the studio today. I'll see you guys next time.